Hello and welcome to another episode of Unstoppable Overcomers. I'm your host, Dorothy O'Dell. I just really, before we get this incredible episode started, I just really want to thank every single veteran for their service. Today is Veterans Day in the United States, so that's why we decided to mess a little bit with our schedule and definitely honor some veterans tonight, as well as here in Canada. We are all about Remembrance Day today. And so we just want to remember those soldiers that never came home or those that, did come home and are no longer here. And I just want to I don't normally do this, but, and I thought I had his picture here, but I don't. And oh, here he is. Yes, I just want to honor my uncle, Master Corporal Brian Graham. He was part of the Canadian Armed Forces and did his time. And then when he was done, went and taught English to the Taiwanese. So I don't get to share his story too often, but I just felt that, I'll start with mine and then I go on to my second family. And I just want to bring up Paul Curtis. Welcome, sir. And Jeffrey Knight. Welcome, guys. These are two of my favorite veterans. And I say that to all my veterans, but I really mean it this time. And I know that Michael is trying to get here. And so these fabulous guys are part of a group called Angels 14, and I talk about Angels 14 all the time. I think people are sick of hearing me talk about Angels 14.
I'm not.
You're not. So I know Jeffrey's been on the show. So Paul this is his first time here. And Paul really felt it in his heart that not only are we going to honor our veterans tonight, but first of all, we're going to hear Paul's story because it's amazing. And I didn't know his story until he sent me his all his information. But Paul really wants to shine the light on how veterans have the services that we can provide for them. And so with that, Paul gave me like a huge amount of resources for both Canadian and US veterans. And so if you go to my website, which is unstoppableovercomers.com, I came home, rushed home, and put that all on the website. So both the Canadian and the US, all the resources are there. So thank you, Paul, for doing that for me. It's like 4 typed pages worth of resources for our veterans. So thank you, sir. With that, Paul, share a little bit about you. We'll start with you.
Well, first off, I thank Jeff for being here, and I thank you for having us on the show. And Michael will come along soon, and Kimberly is in the background, and will send messages as things occur to her, and that I appreciate very much. As you know, we're from Angels 14, and that is a platform for the exchange of ideas and resources for veterans in need. And even when there's no veterans there that are in need, we have topical discussions on a variety of things. And Jeff is the leader of that operation. And so I appreciate him being here today. I started out with some goals because I thought it was important that, Jeff and I and Mike came home pretty well unscathed, and a lot of people didn't. And so that's the reason for wanting to share the resources. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Dorothy, because I'm hoping to put that on other people's pages as well, just that section of it, because there's not much out there like that. And it just hit me the other night that that's what I should do. So in any event, I grew up in the territory of Hawaii, and in a little tiny town called Wahiawa. It was out in the middle of the pineapple fields. And it was pretty amazing. My parents had been the scholastic type. My mother earned her second PhD at the age of 88. And she had one in actuarial science and one in Mandarin culture. And she did it because she could. And it's the only motivation I have for doing the same thing in organizational leadership at the University of Florida, because I want to be able to walk off that stage and say, look, Mom, me too. It's not like I need a job or anything, but in any event, a friend of mine called me one day and he asked me if I wanted to go for a ride into Honolulu. And I said, yeah, I'm not doing anything. So sure. So I get in the car when he shows up and we leave, and we're driving down toward Honolulu, and there were no freeways of any kind. It was mostly 2-lane roads in the whole island. And I said, by the way, Billy, where are we going? And he said, oh, we're going down towards Pearl Harbor. You'll see. Well, little did I know that his purpose for inviting me, and we were close friends. I mean, his father delivered 4 of my siblings. It's delivered more babies in Hawaii than anybody else in history. And so we get there and he says, this is the recruiting station. And the reason I brought you along is because they have what they call a buddy program. And that is, if we go in together under the buddy program, we can be stationed together anywhere we get assigned. And that kind of appealed to me because I really enjoyed his company and his friendship a lot. And so I went in and I signed up. Had to get my parents' permission. My father was not pleased about that because he was a China Marine, and I come from 5 generations of Marines, and now he got one joining the Navy, and that's almost offensive.
They're crayon eaters. Yes.
Well, in any event, I signed up, and 3 days later, I was sent to escape and evasion school. And it was about a mile from my house on an abandoned army base.
Little did you know.
I'm sorry?
Little did you know.
Yeah. In Japanese, we call it a skosh. Anyway, I went up there and they gave me a compass and a knife and told me not to get caught. And there's a very large open field that is weeds all the way up to my shoulders at that time. And so I thought, okay, I knew where the hole in the fence was. And so I wandered over there, and the weeds were so high you couldn't see the hole unless you knew where it was. And so I crawled through it and walked home. And I was sitting there having lunch like when my dad showed up. And he didn't enjoy my sense of humor. I said, listen, they gave me a knife and a compass and told me not to get caught. And I'm pretty sure they don't know where I live. And then he says, son, you're AWOL.
Oh,
a very different response. And he said, you finish up your sandwich and you're going to walk back there because I'm not even going to drive you. Which is just as well because he didn't know about the hole in the fence either. So, so anyway, I go back there And I go across this field to a wooded area, and I think, I'm going to climb up on a tree and just sit up there and watch them come hunting for me, because they never look up. I mean, they just don't, especially if you're high enough. But before that happened, I got caught. And so they took me to this little hooch. It had a table and 2 chairs, a very bright light hanging from the overhead, and a 3-foot long rubber hose sitting on the table. An implied threat if there ever was one. And so I thought, these guys were pretending to be North Vietnamese army officers and doing a really lousy job of it. And so I thought, well, 2 can play this game. So every time they asked me a question, I answered in Japanese. And they got really irritated. You speak English? I go get captain. I said, hi, which is yes in Japanese. So he goes up there and he comes back a few minutes later and he says, you get up from your table. You go with me. Captain wants to see you in his office. And on the way up there, he's telling me about how much trouble I'm in and I'm going to be in the brig. And I'm thinking to myself, that ain't going to happen. So I get into the captain's office, and he's an 06. He's a 4-stroker. And he's been around for 30 some years, and he's getting ready to retire. And so they sent him out to the weeds to do this job. And when we came in, he told the officer to leave and shut the door, invited me to sit in a guest chair, and then came around the other side of his desk to sit next to me. The first thing he said to me is, we're going to have this conversation in English. Do you understand me? And I said, yes, sir. My dad said that was the best answer I ever gave anybody. So anyway, he asked me what language I spoke, and I told him, and I said, I am conversant in it. I don't know legal, medical, or technical terms, but I can have a conversation with anybody. And so he asked me about other languages, and I told him. And he said, I think we may have a job for you. And so I asked him what he was thinking about. He said, well, I can't tell you because you don't have a top secret clearance. He said, what I want you to do is go home, take all of the things the Navy has given to you, including your ID card, and turn them in at Pearl Harbor. And I'm thinking, man, I just got kicked out of the Navy. I have no idea what's going on. So he said, and in a couple of weeks, a Navy commander and an FBI agent are going to come visit you at your home. And they have some questions to ask you. And from that, they will determine whether you get a clearance or not. So I did what I was told. And I came home, and a couple of weeks later, maybe not quite 2 weeks, but the housekeeper answered the door. And she went to my mother and said, there are 2 men here to see Paul. And so my mother came to the door and she said, can I help you? And they said, yeah, we're here to do a background investigation on your son for security clearance. And so she invited them in. And we went back to my bedroom, which was in the far corner of the house, and there was privacy and, And so my dad comes home, and here is a staff car parked in the middle of our driveway, and he can't even get into the garage. So he parks behind that car, goes inside and says, who's parked in our driveway? And my mother says, well, there are two people talking to Paul in his bedroom about a security clearance. So my dad goes, knocks on the door, opens the door. The FBI agent is standing there, and it turns out they knew each other and had for a long time. And so he said, he asked the agent to go out onto the patio and back, which was very quiet. And so it turns out that he told them that I got good grades in school. I never screwed around with other people's property and never hurt anybody. And the agent came back in and he looked at the commander and he said, this interview is through. And the commander says, wait a minute, I got all these other pages to fill out. He said, sir, I would suggest that you be in the car when I start it, because it's a long ways back to Pearl Harbor.
You can't make this up, ladies and gentlemen.
And
You
so-
cannot make this stuff up.
No, it's just what happened. And so I went to my dad and I said, what's going on? And he said, well, you don't have to worry about a security clearance. It turns out my dad was in the OSS in World War II after he left the Marine Corps. And I'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, he knew a lot of people. And so
He knew a guy.
the next thing I get is I get a call from the chief of staff of the commander-in-chief of the Pacific Fleet, who's a 4-star admiral. And so I'm thinking, somebody's playing a joke on me. And he said, we need you to come here and meet with the admiral. I said, all right, when would you like me to be there? And he told me, and so I went. Get to the gate and I can't get in because I don't have an ID card. And so I said, well, if you call the chief of staff, I'm sure that he will let you know. And so he did. The guy came back out to the car and he saluted me. And I thought to myself, boy, somebody wasn't paying attention. Anyway, I go in and I see the admiral. And the first question out of his mouth is, how's your mom doing? I had forgotten that he had been at our home for dinner, he and his wife, and my parents, and the whole gaggle of kids, theirs and his and ours. And I thought, boy, what a strange question. And then it suddenly hit me. These guys know each other. And so I said, she's doing fine. And I said, I understand that I'm being assigned and I have no idea what it's about. And he said, well, you're going overseas. And that's all I can tell you at this point, because you're going to be doing some really sensitive work. I said, okay, and when is that to take place? And he said, you're to be down at Hickam Air Force Base on the 10th of June. Now, once again, I have no ID. And these security guys at the gate are not going to let me in either. And so I'm thinking, this is getting old really fast. And so I said, well, if you call the chief of staff of SINCPAC Fleet, he'll clear it. And so they did. And by the way, I got his phone number while I was up at their office because I knew this was going to happen again. I just, what's the point? So anyway, I get in there and I get on the plane and off we go. I'm the only guy in civilian clothes. And we land at Guam for refueling. And then it hits me, we're going to Japan. Because it's like 8,000 miles from Honolulu to Tokyo. And so anyway, I get there and I haven't a clue where I'm supposed to go or who I'm supposed to meet or anything else. And I walk outside the terminal. This was at Tachikawa. And here is a guy standing there with a sign with my name in Chinese. And I walked up to him and I said, "Do you know what that sign says?" He said, "No, but I'm hoping you do." And I said, "Yes, it's my name in Chinese. It's Gao Bao Lo." And so I said, "I need to get my luggage." He said, "It's in the trunk. Let's go." I mean, these guys did not screw around.
Hey, Paul.
And
Paul,
so,
Paul, for context, what year is this again?
1962.
All right.
Wow.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. This is absolutely fascinating.
No, that's fine. I appreciate the questions. We go off to a naval base at Yokosuka. And once again, no ID for me, so the guard's not going to let us in. And the driver said, "Well, if you call the chief of staff for SINCPAC Fleet, he will clear it." And so he did. And a guy comes out and salutes. And I'm thinking to myself, why don't you guys pay attention? I mean, what's going on here? So I go to a building that has no windows on the downstairs. It's got all of the communications equipment and all that kind of thing. And upstairs is our living quarters and the wardroom and all of that. And every Wednesday, the admiral would come in and he'd bring a scribe with him. There were 11 of us in this unit, and he'd go around the room and he'd ask for a situation summary from each of us. And the reason he did that is because he wanted the rest of us to know what the other guys were doing, which I thought was pretty insightful on his part, but be that as it may. So it turns out that my job was to listen. And I thought, well, this ought to be pretty easy. But one day I was with a partner, and we didn't often work as partners, but depending on what we were doing, they felt that for safety, that was a smart thing to do. And this older lady comes up to us and she says, "Would you like to meet some nice young ladies?" And my partner, without even giving me a hint, grabs my hand and holds it up and says, "No, man, we like nice boys on." She took off like a bolt of lightning. I kid you not, man. It was just hilarious. And then I turned around and looked at him and I said, "You ever do that to me again without warning, you're going to be on the deck." So anyway, they sent me to get some really, really nice 3-piece suits, gave me a briefcase that was very specialized, and sent me out into the Netherlands to gather information.
Wow.
And so I one day was on an elevator, got on, I was the only person on there. The next floor, the elevator stops and 2 people get on. The elevator closes, and we start to go up again. And they start chattering. And one of them looks at the other and says, hey, be careful what you say because we don't know who this guy is. And the other guy says, well, he may be either a Brit or an American and they don't speak our language, so it's no big deal. And it was everything I could do to keep from moving a single muscle on my face. And I couldn't even smile at them. As they got off the elevator, the temptation to reach through the door and hold it open and say to them in their own language, don't worry, I'll keep your secrets, and then let the door shut and go. But wasn't allowed to do stuff like that, so I didn't.
Wow.
There were lots and lots of those kinds of stories. Most of them humorous, but I wound up going to 31 countries, and I actually had a Russian KGB officer ask me how I managed to be able to speak Russian without an accent. And I looked at him and I just couldn't resist. I said, because I went to the same school you did in Russian. And he says, oh. and he knew, you know, I'd been to, my parents insisted that we learn foreign languages competently, and insisted that we learn how to play a musical instrument competently. Now, understand that I was a teenager at that time. I decided that I was going to learn the drums. And I figured out that the louder I played, the shorter my practice was, and then I could go outside and play ball with my buddies. And so my dad did not approve of that. In any event, let's see, where do we go?
So I have to ask, Paul,
you,
is your last name really Curtis, or is that just like a front?
Right.
Since, you know, you were in diplomatic intelligence here. Like, I have to ask that question.
My last name is actually Curtis. And you may remember that I'm 80 years old and nobody cares anymore.
So,
they figure I've forgotten most of what I know, but
we care
anyway.
Yes,
and I know you're one of the older veterans that I know, and that's really why I wanted you on the show, because I'm sure you have seen more than I'll ever forget, or more than anybody else will ever forget in their career. So I love hearing your story. Like, I can't believe it. You decided to just go on a Jeep ride and then end up in the Navy, then going AWOL, and then being a diplomatic officer, like all in like a short span. Like it just blows my mind.
It's crazy, isn't it? It's a movie, is what it is.
It's funny you said that, because I was watching the movies and playing in my head as Paul was talking.
So was I. In old 80s style movies, super spy stuff.
007. We have our own 007 here.
Yes. 100%.
Well,
it's absolutely fascinating. And for any of the listeners, if I can make a point here real quick, for any of the listeners out there, you know, all of us at, you know, younger than Paul, sorry, Paul, no offense. You know, even by 30 years, this would never happen in that. I mean, 1962, that's why I asked for the context, because all of a sudden it's like, here's a knife, here's a field, don't get caught, crawl out through the hole, I'm going to go home, have a sandwich. That kind of thing is just unheard of. And it's so fascinating.
Well, I'll tell you another funny story. One day I was told to go to the gun locker and check out a sidearm. And I thought, well, this is getting out of hand. But I go in there, and here is this older black second class gunner's mate. And he said, "You really expect me to hand you a weapon and ammunition, and you don't even have any ID?" And I said, "Well, let me give you a number to call." And so he did. And when he got off the phone, he said, "So your name is Curtis?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Do you know a Claude Curtis?" I said, "I know two of them." "Well, this would probably be your dad. And do you know where he is?" I said, "Yes, I do. And in a couple of weeks, I'm going to take some leave and go to Honolulu. And well, let me back up a little bit. He and my dad served as partners in the OSS in World War II and lost track of each other.
Wow.
And so when I told him when I was leaving, and I said, "If you need a seat on the plane, I'm happy to make that arrangement," because I could. And so we did. We flew from Tachikawa to Hickam Air Force Base. And here are my parents and all of my siblings waiting for me. And we get off the plane together. He's in uniform and I'm not. And
you have no idea.
He said, "No." And he says, "You go ahead and spend a few minutes with your folks, and then I'll come and join you." And I said, "Okay." So we went and hugged, and and then my dad looks over my shoulder and he said, "Who's that black man following you?" This is training that never goes away. I mean, it just doesn't. It's situational awareness. And I stuck my finger over my shoulder and I did this, and George came over, and my dad and he stood there and stared at each other for a minute. And then they both burst out in tears.
Wow.
They had been through some stuff that I had no idea about and never will. But they stood and hugged and talked and hugged some more and cried until the ramp agent came over and said, "Listen, we have to move the plane, so you're going to have to go inside the terminal." So George came and stayed with us in our home for almost a week. And every night after dinner, he and my dad would go out on the patio, which was a covered patio. It's not an open space. And they'd sit and they'd talk for hours. And we'd all gone to bed. I mean, we were just, And so then George came to me and he says, "Now, where are you going from here?" And I said, "Well, I'm headed to Travis Air Force Base because I have to get a flight down to San Diego." And he said, "Could you get me on that flight?" I said, "Sure." And so I made a phone call, and there's a seat available, so off we go.
Because he knows.
We land at Travis. Yeah, well, we land at Travis, and we go out off the plane, and here's a guy standing there with a sign that has my name in Chinese again. And so I said, "Come with me." And we walk over to the car. Now, this guy that's driving is a black man. And I tell you that to give you context for what's about to happen. George says, "I want to take you to my house to meet my mother." And so I said, okay, just tell the driver where you want to go. And that's what we'll do. So we drove over to the black section of Berkeley. And I suddenly realized I was the only white guy in sight. And I looked at George and I said, why is that? And he said, oh, you really don't know, do you? I said, no, we had friends in Hawaii. We didn't care what color they were or what their ethnicity was or anything else. We either liked them or we didn't, and end of story. And so he said, well, after dinner, we're going to go out and sit on the rocking chairs in the front porch, and I'm going to explain to you how the world works. And so I said, okay. And he did. And I was just blown away by it. I had never experienced racial prejudice. And, you know, we had next door neighbors that were black. And we lived in a pretty Tony area, but he was a commander, or excuse me, he was a captain and she was a commander. And I would watch him open the door for her to get into the car to leave. And I just thought, you know, that's a real class act. And my mother would take them dinner when they came home late at night because they were too tired. They were both surgeons, by the way, at Tripler. And she would take them dinner at night because they were too tired to cook and they were just going to go to bed on an empty stomach and have to get up early in the morning. Because it's a drive from where we live to Tripler Army Hospital. But anyway, when I decided that I had had enough flying every day, all over the place, I thought, you know, this has got to come to an end. And so in 10 years it did. And when they knew that I was leaving, by the way, my chain of command was interesting. It was this 4-star admiral and the president of the United States.
Wow.
That was it.
Something else
and what that meant was that I had a top secret SCI Class Q clearance, which is the same thing the president has. Wow. And so they sent me to the Naval Academy, not as a cadet, but as a place where I could sit and write. And they wanted a summary of the things that I did. And so I started writing, and the only two people who knew what I was doing or where I was or why I was there was the commandant and the operations officer at the Naval Academy. And the operations officer and I became very, very close friends. And he moved out here to the West Coast when he got out of the service. And we hooked up again, and I was with him when he died. He wound up having Parkinson's but wow. In any event, I did that for a while, and I was in a basement. There were no windows, and I had a bank vault for a door.
You can't make this up. This is like this is like Netflix.
I understand the need for security, but I would think around these guys, nobody's going to come screwing around with what I'm doing. But I had to put that, what I was writing, in a safe when I left at night.
Wow.
And so anyway, I got through with that. And then I was sent out to the Navy and Marine Corps Reserve Training Center at Dodger Stadium because I wanted to go back to school. And I went to Cal State LA, which was not far from there. And once again, I'm in a room that has a bank vault for a door. And now I'm assessing pictures, images. And I thought, I don't know what they expect me to do with this, but I had all of these photographs, I mean, literally prints, laid out on the table, and I'm looking at them, and I suddenly realized that the North Koreans are reinforcing the bridge. And I'm thinking about that, and I'm wondering why. And so I called a friend of mine who was also in the same boat that I was in. And he was in Los Angeles. And so I had him come over and I said, I need you to study these and tell me what you think. I said, I have a theory, but you know North Korea better than I do. And so he looked at it and he says,
he knows North Korea.
They're reinforcing that bridge because they're sending heavy water in tanker trucks to their nuclear site. I went to the guy who was in charge of intelligence there, and I said, sir, I think you need to come down and see these photographs. And by the way, this is a friend of mine who was a colleague for a number of years. So he comes down and he takes a look and he agrees. He picks the phone up and calls the president on a secure line.
He knew a guy.
And
Jeff, I think we know a guy now.
We know a guy.
We know a guy.
He knew more guys than I did. And so what you'll find interesting about this is that his name was Jackie Cooper, the movie actor.
Really?
Wow.
Seriously. Yep.
I'll be damned.
And he knew lots of guys.
Yeah. Yes.
But I hope Michael gets on here pretty quick.
So go ahead. This is your show, Dorothy. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say I'll text him and see where he's at. But all I can say is wow. Like this is like I didn't know anything about this with Paul, and I'm just like in awe. I just want to shout out our Heart and Soul of Angel Sport team said hey to us all over here. To Miss Tammy Laird and Sean says joining while sitting at the bar having a free veterans dinner. So I hope all our veterans here got their free dinner today, wherever you were eating today. I'm just going to text Michael and you ask your question, Jeff.
So I know I think we're getting about 15 minutes, right? Is it about an hour?
Yeah.
That we're doing this. So I think that we could sit here realistically and obviously talk to Paul for the next week and still not grasp all the things that he has done in the service of our country. And of course, that's what Veterans Day is about. I love what you said at the beginning, Paul, that you, myself, Michael, we escaped relatively scar-free, right? I mean, in comparative to other people, other brothers and sisters. Now, at the same time, it's important to note that that everybody has served, and it doesn't matter the capacity. And so the other thing that I wanted to point out, because I want to go back to the porch education, you got, because you got a true no shit education from that guy when he took you home, right? Sat you down on the porch and said, hey, I'm going to teach you how the world works. How much did that impact the rest of your career and your perspective?
Quite a bit, because it essentially reframed relationships for me. And he had a hard time understanding at first why I didn't care what color he was or where he came from or what his accent was or any of the rest of that nonsense. You either have Oh, Tammy's here.
Yes, she said you're
You
amazing.
either
Paul.
have you either have a love for people or you don't. And I think that's based on what is in your heart rather than what you're wearing or what you look like or any of the rest of that nonsense. But I want to share a quote with you, which I think is kind of important. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Mm-hmm.
Love that quote.
See, I think that God knew long before which one of us were going to be here. And so, and that comes from a man named Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And he was a French philosopher, a paleontologist, and a Jesuit priest. And he's the guy that came up with that. And I ran it by Scott Duncan one day, and he said, there is a video out that shows the moment of insemination. And he said there's actually a flash of light that occurs. And I thought, that's pretty supportive.
Yes.
So,
well, and to your and by the way, Scott Duncan, another fantastic veteran that's out there. Follow him as well, former Marine. I shouldn't say former Marine. Marine, retired, but Marine nonetheless. And Paul, and this is what, and really to spotlight Paul here a little bit too, is that this is what we get every week. There's a point in there where the education was given to you. He had a hard time understanding from your perspective. You most likely didn't understand a lot of things that he was talking about either. But the point of that is that he sat down with you and provided that information to you. And it was a civil conversation, and it was simply helping understand one another in one another's worlds. And what's so beautiful about you, Paul, is that you are so willing to give that same type of education to us out there, veteran or not, and the wisdom that we get from you, because the experience that you lived is not what most people lived. And what Dorothy and I were talking about is flashing back. That's what it is. It's like a TV show that somebody's flashing back in time, right? And then the actors are acting out what happened. And that's just completely in my brain when I hear about these things, because I would certainly, personally, I wouldn't necessarily just go somewhere and go ahead and get on a plane without a little bit of understanding, and that, okay. Now understand there's, it's within inside the Navy, but then it's that, there are people that do it. So I love the fact of, by the way, appreciate your service, Paul. Truly, truly do. I read your bio that came out with the, when the show was advertised. I've known you for 3 years, and I didn't know all that stuff. And so in all reality, and tell me to shut up, Dorothy, if I'm talking too much. It's really an honor to be able to listen to these stories and to see where people come from, because that's the true way that we build relationships, that we have relationships. It's the way that we get through the suck together. So it's a personal thanks from me to you, Paul. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff.
And of course, go ahead, Paul.
I make it a point to try to learn from everybody. In some cases, it's how to do it. In other cases, it's how not to do it and why not. But, I think the key is really being a good listener. And it's been said many times that when we're dealing with vets who are having difficulty, whatever the reason, We can provide them with a presence, an acknowledgement, a smile, and let them talk if they want to. And sometimes all it takes is, how are you doing today? To get that conversation started. And I think it's important that people learn how to listen because so many don't. Instead, they're preparing a response to what you're saying before they've even heard the rest of it. And oftentimes they interrupt you and tell you what their response is. And,
Yes.
It's just evidence they didn't hear. So,
Yeah.
And I've learned a lot from you too, Jeff, and I appreciate it. I really do. And, I watched you in a leadership position, navigating the waters, and it hasn't always been fun, but it usually is.
100%. Isn't always fun, but usually is really the truth of the matter. Dorothy, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah.
Yes. I just want to say, we are here to hear Paul's story, but I also want to give kudos to you too, Jeff, a lieutenant colonel from the Army, sir. And as if you guys are just tuning in and you didn't hear Paul's story, go back and listen to it, and you'll hear the subtle, digs. I call them digs, but they're not digs. Like, if you know anything about veterans, you know that each part of the military has something to say about the other ones. And our cowboy is coming on soon here. He's trying to log into his computer, who is a Marine, always a Marine, and that's between the crayons and everything like that. There's just something about this community. And actually, Tammy just put something here. Jeff is a true blue or green leader. Absolutely. 100%. And I don't know how I honestly found you guys, but I am so truly grateful that I did. And you guys allowed a civilian into your world. And I have been so honored and humbled to be part of Angels 14 for the last 2.5 years. And I go there intending to give, and I get something each and every week that I am able to show up. And I know watching and hearing your stories has brought to life something inside of me that is just like, wow, like it's bigger than me, and these stories need to come out. And that's why I provided the platform. And here we go. Lips himself, cowboy is in the house.
Oh, hell.
Yeah.
The Marine is in the house.
I got to be fashionably late.
364 days till the Marine Corps ball, right?
Countdown already.
This is what I love about this group. It's like the camaraderie in here. We need to bottle this and bring it to the world, because I swear it doesn't matter where you're at. You could be in your darkest moment on an Angels 14 call, and by the time that we're done that call, you're in a better place. Like 100%.
And it's so true, Dorothy. And before you get into Michael, because I know you're going to ask him a question too, or he's going to say something. I don't know.
Dorothy, what you need to understand, and I suspect you do after all, is that it doesn't matter whether you were a veteran or a first responder. You've experienced horrible trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's in different circumstances, doesn't change the fact that it's trauma, and there is healing available for it and resources and that kind of thing. And that's what really Angels 14 is about. It's not, well, you have to be this or you have to be that. Who cares? And so it's people that are willing to share and people that are willing to listen and make suggestions and offer opportunities and resources. That's really all it is. I mean, we let Michael in.
Yeah, even Michael, even Cowboy, right?
Even the Marine.
even the Marine and a bunch of other Marines. For whatever reason, we got a lot of Marines.
We do a lot.
And
help too.
But to your point, Paul, you're right. Is that Dorothy, even though not a veteran, even though from the civilian allies, what we call them, still the trauma was there. The unstoppable overcomer, which this is why I love this platform and the things that you're doing, Dorothy, because it really, in all reality, it takes all of us. So when I talk about the veteran community, it's not just the veterans. And the one thing that I, to my team that I work with every day, I put out today, I said, hey, if you're going to think of vet today, by all means, think of vet, right? But please, if you have the chance, thank their family as well, because their family served right alongside them, just in a different capacity. And in all reality, in my opinion, my personal humble opinion is that, like for my wife had it much, much more difficult than I did to handle everything. Because when I went away, I went away. And she had the kids, she had the house, she had the bills, she had all that stuff. And so I want to make sure I get that in here too on this, is that, hey, it's not just about the veteran, it's about the veteran, the families and friends, and the allies.
And you're never just a jest.
And you're never just a just. Yes. Woo!
All right, Cowboy, you're dying to say something.
How do I follow both of them?
One of the things that I am concerned about is the rate of suicide among active duty and veteran personnel. It is through the roof. And the last thing that happens before somebody decides to swallow their muzzle is they lose all hope. And we're there to give them that hope back and show them a way to recover from that. And whether it involves addiction or any of the other issues, PTSD, there are wives of military personnel who experience really adverse conditions, avoidable, but adverse nevertheless. And the stress level on them is way higher than it was on any of us, because we knew what we were getting into and we knew the consequences, and end of story. And so, our goal was to get out safely and make sure all of our people got out safely.
Yep.
And so we all did that. But Michael, would you be willing to take a moment and share about your dog training and your second chance ranch?
Yeah. First, let me piggyback on the family and how the family serves too. I was an Army brat. My dad retired last year from the Army, so I grew up in that world. And I would say, yeah, the wives and the children. I think especially when your parent is deployed to a combat zone or not, they're deployed overseas anywhere. I think, like my dad, he did a good job trying to make it where, give us that peace of mind that, I remember him before he went to Kuwait showing me, see, I'm here. This is where stuff's going on, is over here. What he failed to mention is he spent most of his time in Iraq. But to keep me, as a young kid from worrying, he was like, hey, I'm down here. All the bad stuff's going on up there. But you still, you see all the things on the news. And even though your parents try not to let you see that, you see the news from time to time. And you see what's going on over there. And most of my friends, their parents are in the military, and some of their parents come back messed up or don't come back, so it's definitely a tough thing. And like you said, like when you're in the military, you raised your right hand, you took that oath, you knew what you're signing up for. kids and spouses. I guess spouses kind of think they probably have an idea what they're signing up for. Kids are just kind of there, you know. You don't really have much of a say. So yeah,
You're told.
Yeah, you just
in my world, kids are to be seen and not heard, and you just did as you're told.
pretty much. I don't know that I did a good job of doing what I was told, but you know, I was there.
Not you, Michael.
So with that, to any military spouses or kids out there, thank you for your service and sacrifice as well, along with our veterans and those out there, you know, still keeping up the good fight. Keep doing what you're doing. We love you and respect you, and we're praying for you. Back to Paul's question. What do you want to know, Paul? What do you want me to say?
Devil
So
Dog
what is
K9, second chance?
Yes. Tell us about those services.
Yeah, so Second Chance, I've been doing that since 2019. That kind of came from my battle with darkness. Ultimately led me to meet Jeff and everybody else on this call right here. But I had my struggles with my demons and suicide and all that, and found my healing through nature. Used that to start helping other veterans and first responders struggling. We do camping retreats. I do coaching, specifically crisis intervention coaching, helping talk people down off that ledge, connecting them to the resources out there. Devil Dog K9. That's something cool and new that we've been doing for about 4 months now. Got a service dog almost 2 years ago, which kind of led me to want to know more about dogs. Led me to get into dog training. Love it, absolutely love it. Actually, reason I'm late is I just got back from Memphis. We were down there introducing Ben Owen from We Fight Monsters in Flanders Field to the dog that we're training for them to help them out on the streets. So we had a good time training the last couple days in some of the most dangerous streets in the country. And yeah, we had a great time down there, but I absolutely love training the dogs. Pet dogs are fun, they pay the bills, but the working dogs is what I absolutely love. The protection dogs, service dogs, all that kind of stuff.
So if anybody out there listening needs that, look up Devil Dog K9.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. And Cowboy, we know that you are going to treat them well.
Always.
So I just have to say one thing. So if there is a veteran out there or somebody who's in active duty or a first responder that is in a dark place right now, I have to say, when I first came across Angels 14 a couple years ago, one of the very first calls that I was on, there was a gentleman there. And at that time, if you didn't have to turn your camera on, wherever you were at, whatever your space you're at is where we meet you. And I remember Jeff and the later saying, hey, if you want to talk, we're here for you. And this particular gentleman would not come on camera, and he was in an extreme dark place. Extreme. Fast forward to 2 years later, and this guy is doing amazingly well. And I believe it's 100% of not only with the camaraderie that is in this group, but it's also like we check up on each other. If we know we're having a bad day, one of us is having a bad day, we check up on each other. This group has gotten me through some pretty dark times too in the last couple of years. And if you're on the fence and you know you need help, and you want that camaraderie and you want that connection, this is the place to be. Every Friday at noon Eastern Standard Time, we are on there. Those of us that can make it, you don't have to come every week, but it is a place to get fed emotionally, spiritually, and just connect with your brothers and sisters that knew what you were going through at one point. And we're just all there for you. So I just had to put that plug in. especially after what Michael just said. And so, yeah, I don't just connect with one of us. We'll get you the Zoom because it could possibly change in the future. But I actually last time when Jeff was on my other show, A Journey in Boots, I had said if we could get 1,000 people on a Angels 14 call, that I would fundraise to get the monies to be able to afford 1,000 people on one call. So my challenge is still there. I will do it. But we need to be there for each other. And thank you, Paul, for saying, we really want to thank our veterans for their service, but we're also here to support you.
Yeah, 100%.
Dorothy, I think what you really need to realize is that if you got 1,000 people on Angels 14 all at the same time, if they each took the time to sneeze, they'd run out of time before the program. So there's a reason that it's not this gigantic thing.
We'd have to do some breakout rooms and stuff.
Yeah, we would have to do some breakout rooms.
But my vision, I don't know what. So I'm not even on the leadership team here, but my vision is because we want to help more veterans, right? That's the whole purpose. We want to help as many as we possibly can. And if you're just tuning in now, at the beginning of the show, I had said Paul had given me 4 pages of amazing resources for both Canadian and U.S. Veterans, which are on my website at www.unstoppableovercomers.com. Just go to the Veteran Service tab, and they're all there. But if you are looking for, that one-on-one connection each week, you miss your buddies from active duty. Like I promise you, there's one person, there's lots of people in this group that it can easily get you what you need. Kimberly's in the background saying a great problem to have, Paul. Absolutely.
Yes, love it. And by the way, in this show, we didn't even begin to touch Paul's career in this. So, but truthfully and generally, that's what we're there for. That's why we do these. That's why we're willing to come on this, Dorothy. You've asked us to come on in honor of veterans and all that. It's simply getting the word out there. We're strong. We're simply stronger together. Mm-hmm. And everybody needs to ask help. And that's why we started Angels 14. That's why Cowboy started his. That's why Paul does the work that he does, which if he told us, he would have to kill us.
That's right. I was going to say we can't talk about that.
But we can't talk about Bruno. No. But that's where it's at. So please, if there's anybody listening out there that needs that, reach out. Just ask. And Cowboy can vouch for this. And in terms of that darkness that he talked about. It's his story to tell, not mine, but his darkness that he talks about. It's, it's absolutely, I'm absolutely humbled every single day by the stories of our veterans. And it doesn't, and by the way, the veteran stories doesn't need to be something like amazingly like, wow, like huge or any of this. It can be run of the mill every day, but everybody has a story, and somebody else is going to benefit from that story in some way. So tell the story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's funny you said that, because I don't know if anybody caught the show or seen this book, Pennies from Vietnam, A Sister at War, a brother, or A Sister at Home, a Brother at War. And this guy was, Larry Smith was in Vietnam, and he turned 19, went off to Vietnam to go fight the war. And he promised his sister he'd send pennies home to her, not realizing that in the middle of the Korean jungle, there is no pennies. So he sent letters home. And after he passed away, she got all his letters, and she's going through all these letters that he sent home. Of course, Larry changed. Larry wasn't the same when he came back from 2 years in Vietnam. And then when he went to go do a second tour in Vietnam, he didn't write letters the second time. because he just became a former shell of the person that he was. He was completely different than the Larry that left. And when she found these letters, she decided to go find Larry's brothers in arms, whatever, friends from the war, and she ended up finding a bunch of them. And each one of them said, "You got to write this book," right? And long story short, by her sharing Larry's stories, it opened up for at least 50 Vietnam veterans to be able to share their story. They were a lot of Vietnam vets don't talk about what happened in Vietnam. Like Afghanistan, I've heard lots of stories, but I haven't heard too many about Vietnam. And so these guys were like tight-lipped, but by sharing Larry's story, several of them have come out and are now sharing their story and are letting go of all that survivor's guilt and things like that or even just seeing what they saw in the jungle, right? And things like that. So now by sharing Larry's story, there's more coming out. And so that just aired last Thursday. And I said to Tracy, the sister, I'm like, we need to make this a movie. Because could you imagine? I get there's military movies out there, Saving Private Ryan and all that. But, what I think the real actualization, just being able to share that is huge.
100%. 100%.
And then we have real life Angels 14 every week, which I'm sure we could turn into a movie.
Half of that stuff can't go in a movie. That's behind closed doors.
It's why we don't record it.
Well, that's because you're not a good actor, Michael.
I thought it was because I talk like a Marine.
The point that Jeff made, though.
He is a Marine.
The point that Jeff made is important in that it doesn't matter what your story is. It doesn't matter if you were a grunt or a commanding general. All of them have a story to tell. In a lot of cases, even in the higher ranks. It's not a pleasant story because they have lost so many people and they're walking around with survivor's guilt. Mm-hmm. Even if they aren't aware of it, that's what's going on and it's painful. And so, it's not, I will say this, I have been blessed to do what I've been able to do. Had it not been for my parents and their insistence on learning the languages and learning a musical instrument and doing well in school, I went to the University of Kyoto for 2 years and studied mathematics and physics because I hated math in high school. I had a math teacher who was a very nice person, but not a very good teacher. And I was the only white guy in the class. And these people were all sitting around wondering if I was getting anything out of this. And I went up through spherical trigonometry. And which unfortunately I've never used a day since, but I got there.
Neither is Cowboy.
And well, I'm sure he's been to school and I'm sure he's learned some things and even if it's how not to do it.
Learned a lot of that.
Love you, brother.
The point is that I was blessed to be able to get the education that I have. And I have turned that into a calling, which is to recover runaways and non-custodial parental abductees and those kinds of things. And I don't charge for it. I don't have to charge for it. I don't need to put a burden on a family that's already in stress.
Amazing.
And so far I've managed to recover over 100 of them, well over 100, but I quit counting at 100. I just didn't care because it wasn't the number that was important. And right now I'm looking for somebody in Canada. And there may be some mental issues involved with that, but, I'll keep looking until I find them. So, and I think we all have a calling. I'm sorry?
Such giving, Paul. Wow, just awesome.
Well,
absolutely.
And once again, it's because I've been blessed to receive. And so I have a responsibility to give. And I don't need to monetize it because I'm blessed in that area too. And so, I'm not wealthy, but, I have everything I need to be who I am, and all the rest I don't worry about. And the reason I don't worry is because if I could fix it, I wouldn't have to worry about it. So we know that there's no point in worrying. But I think the last thing I want to share with you is the notion of gratitude. And I think each of us here lives with the notion of gratitude. Because when you have a grateful mindset, you're willing to do things that other people aren't. And it removes the discomfort and sometimes the hate and all of the rest of that, because there's no room for that when you're grateful for everything that you have and you're just focused on that. So, in any event, I have truly enjoyed this. I'm glad that Michael got here, and I appreciate Jeff being here. And I especially appreciate you, Dorothy, for hosting this. And I look at the smile on your face and I know that something worked.
For the record, I want to put this out there so everybody knows Paul threatened me if I didn't make it in time. So I drove really fast to make sure I got home in time to be here.
He knows a few people. And then we can't forget about Kimberly in the background.
Yes. Kimberly, are you going to come on camera?
Back there.
Have you up for a quick second.
Recording us.
So Kimberly is our roving reporter, and normally she comes on and does the fundamentals, but we decided that the fundamentals section would take away from tonight's show, and we just wanted to truly honor our veterans for their service. And so she's just been in the background praying and everything for the show as we were, and praying for everybody as we were. And I think she must have stepped away from the camera, or she's on doing something anyway. So we want to thank her too. Yes, we want to thank her so much for being behind the scenes and praying for us all as this unfolds. And she put a note in the back. She's unable to come on live, right? No, not a problem. We did go past our time. I appreciate everybody staying the extra time. If you three could just stay on for 5 seconds after, or a couple minutes after I end this live stream, just to thank you. I'll be right back with you guys. But I just want to thank our guests for joining us tonight. Tammy, Sean, Nancy, and the rest of you that were too chicken to say hi. And I want to say Happy Veterans Day to all of our veterans out there. Thank you for your service. And I want to honor and remember all of the fallen heroes in Canada that never made it home. We want to thank them and their families for their service as well. And just to remember them on this day. And with that, come back next week. Actually, I'm being interviewed next week because, yes, I am one of 10 authors in this amazing book, Bringing New Words to Your Body Conversation. So, yes, I'm being interviewed on my chapter next week.
Love it.
Yeah. So, come back. Remember, be unstoppable in all that you do, and same time, same channel next week. Bye for now.